End of discussion. How the left's outrage industry shuts down debate, manipulates voters, and makes America less free and fun. We have both authors on the line with us right now, Mary Katharine Ham and Guy Benson. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning to you.
Thanks for taking time out of your morning to be on with us.
But of course.
Mary Katharine, I was reading a piece that I think you uploaded last night to Hot Air, talking about Jerry Seinfeld and Colin Quinn as you do researching your culture of outrageous outrage. You found a bright spot with these two guys.
Well, yeah, just when we were writing in the discussion, we thought, man, this might get depressing because so many people are not super in favor of free speech as long as the person speaking disagrees with them. They're happy to shut that speech down, and that's what we wanted to talk about. But when it comes to comedians, we have noticed that they see this end of discussion tactic and they realize this is terrible for our jobs because their whole job is to get on stage and test out new material. That's what they do. Comedy sometimes is a little risque. It occasionally does offend one or two people in the audience. And if the new standard, according to the left, which is what we outline in the discussion, is if one person is offended, you can't say it, then these guys are out of a job. And so it's nice to see them pushing back. And they're so high profile. Jerry Seinfeld especially, not exactly an edgy comic, a pretty well accepted safe guy to have on your college campus or at your family event. And yet even he is worried about this, and that's important.
I don't know. I'm a little offended about his airline food, stuff. It just rubs me the wrong way. Well, you mentioned comedy always offends, not always offends, but I mean, there's a portion that's meant to make you think, make you get you offended, get you riled up. But previously, there weren't mass protests, there weren't letter writing campaigns, there wasn't change.org petitions. Where is the genesis of this idea where if you dislike something someone says, that you then can get on your high horse, so to speak, and try to shut them down? Where did it begin?
Well, I think there's been political correctness for a long time. There have been letter-writing campaigns and boycotts and that sort of thing going back many decades. What we're seeing now is the proliferation of that phenomenon and the weaponization of outrage. And we think part of that has to do with social media. It makes it a lot easier for organized, loud, angry people to get together, band together, and try to influence and bully people using social media, various tools like that. And by the way, we're both big fans of the internet, so we don't want to blame the internet for this problem. This is something in human nature, and it's being indulged. It's being indulged by often the people who are at the center of the controversies, who are just so freaked out by it that they want to apologize and backpedal and sort of obsequiously prostrate themselves and say, so sorry. And often that's not enough. People are losing their jobs. People are losing friends. And that's really the core of what we get at in End of Discussion. We are exposing and exploring how the left primarily is increasingly trying to win, and I use air quotes around win, political and cultural debates by preventing those debates from really happening in any sort of authentic way. They've decided, and they're realizing, that often it's much easier to delegitimize, disqualify, demonize your opposition so you don't have to grapple with their ideas in any sort of serious or substantive way. And this is a terrible way to carry on our national conversation. It is a problem that, in our view, is getting worse, and that's why we really thought it was important to write End of Discussion.
Guy Benson, longtime friend of the program. Mary Katharine Ham, I believe, making her first appearance. It's Riley and Scott here on WROK. Their new book is out now, and it is fantastic. End of Discussion. You can find out more, endofdiscussionbook.com. It's one of the big differences here, perhaps, in the past, pick a number, 4 or 5 years. The idea that it's not public figures. It's not those people who have accepted that criticism and heck, letter writing campaigns might be part of the job, but going after private individuals. I love the fact you pick up on we talked about on the show back then, the North Carolina bar, the DJ who played Blurred Lines and was fired because someone said it might trigger sexual assault victims. But this idea that private citizens who tweet something that someone might not like now become targets, that's relatively new, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I find so disturbing about this trend. And there's a news story that I wrote about yesterday out of Florida where a high school principal completely outside of the bounds of his job, not in the school, not with a school account, posted an online comment on a story about the McKinney pool party video that was utterly innocuous. He just said he defended the police officer, but didn't do it with any sort of racism or nastiness or vulgarity. He has been removed from his job. They're looking for a replacement because his comment offended people. Like, that is not a fireable offense, that you offended people in your life outside of your job by holding an opinion they don't hold. Like, that is a new line, and that is the end of discussion. And that's what scared me so much before we started writing this book, and why we got off our butts and wrote into discussions, was we saw the Brendan Ike incident with Mozilla, the man who started this company, ousted from it because the sin of donating $1,000 to a mainstream proposition that was pro-traditional marriage in California. And we thought, that's not America. That's not how this works. And if you cannot have a different opinion than people that might offend the little snowflakes and keep your job, then you don't actually have free speech.
You know, and speaking of the little snowflakes, and I think we discussed this when Guy was with us a time before, the thing that takes place on many college campuses absolutely blows me away. You know, we're going to have a speaker come in. We're going to try to shout that person down. If nothing else, we're going to get signs up promoting, you know, there's trigger warnings throughout everything they're going to say, and we need a safe room. Maybe some coloring books, some puppies playing and all that. We don't want you too exposed to, you know, ideas and topics that might go contrary to your own opinion. That isn't what higher education's all about.
Yeah, and I think that if you look at academia and college campuses, sadly for decades, they have been bastions of the opposite of what they're supposed to be bastions of when it comes to free exchange, free expression, free thought, critical thinking. And college campuses are sort of where the very worst impulses of the outrage mob aren't just indulged, in many cases they're encouraged. And this is a almost exclusive dominion of the left. This is, as we write in End of Discussion, there's plenty of fake outrage to go around on all sides of the aisle, right? But the left this is a problem on the left, more so on the right, because they are much more effective at taking people down and claiming scalps because their outrage mongers are afforded a lot more credibility than conservatives are. Why? Because the left tends to control many of the opinion-shaping institutions in America that make these decisions about, okay, is this complainant, is this person who's outraged a crank and a weirdo, which they often dismiss conservatives as, sometimes correctly, or should we really listen to what they have to say and take them seriously? And when you look at the media, when you look at the academy, when you look at entertainment, it's pretty clear where a lot of those ideological proclivities lie. So that's why we explain the imbalance right versus left, although we do not shy away from criticizing and reflecting on our own side and where we cross some of these boundaries as well. But, you know, I want to go back to something that you said that was so important. Yes, this is poisoning our politics. Yes, it is not good for our national debate at a high level, whether it's in the media or in politics. And we do focus quite a lot in End of Discussion about those things, but this is trickling down to just average, ordinary people trying to live their lives to the point that people are feeling in their personal lives reticent to simply speak their mind and state their opinion, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's at a dinner party, wherever it might be. They're just not really sure. At the office, certainly, they're kind of looking over their shoulder, walking on eggshells, and we fear they are increasingly saying, you know what, it's just not worth it, I got to keep my mouth shut. That is what the End of Discussion Brigade is going for. They want to sanitize the national conversation of things that they don't want to hear, and that is not what America ought to be about. That is really the core of End of Discussion.
Guy Benson, Mary Katharine Ham with us, the new book, End of Discussion, endofdiscussionbook.com, plus fine bookstores, Amazon.com, elsewhere as well. It's Riley and Scot on WROK. Is the president one of the chief purveyors of this sort of argument? I heard him again yesterday, and he's used this line many, many times where he says, that's not who we are. So if you disagree, not only do you have the wrong policy, but you somehow lack the American ideal in your heart and soul, because that's not who we are. He's done that a lot. There was the whole, get in the back seat. I won. It's not enough. He doesn't necessarily try to win an argument as much as he tries to question the motives of his opponents.
Yeah, I think President Obama is an expert at this. Another of his favorite lines is literally, "The time for debate is over."
Mm-hmm.
We're done with that. And if you disagree with me, that's not who we are as Americans. End of discussion. So yeah, I do think that he is a leader of this type of thought. And of course, when you have the president, all politicians do this to some extent. That's how politics works, and that's why this problem is worse in politics than it is in other areas of life, perhaps. But I do think he, unfortunately, does it more often. He's more aggressive about it. And it does come from this liberal mindset that Guy was talking about that just sort of says, hey, these people deserve to be shut up. This is the end of discussion for a reason, because these people's opinions and thoughts are just not worthy of the public square. And I think he genuinely believes that about much of America. And that is a problem if you're the president representing all of America. So, yeah, I think you're onto something there. And we can hope that in the coming years, perhaps we get a president who is less like that. In one Hillary Clinton. I'm just kidding.
Well, there is no discussion.
I would just jump in and add, how often did we hear and continue to hear that opposition to President Obama is rooted in race and somehow unprecedented? That is one of their go-to lines to basically delegitimize policy criticisms.
Mm-hmm.
If we say, hey, we think that this Iran deal is a giant disaster, and here's why, or we think the New START treaty, to pick a random example, is that, Obamacare, the list goes on, they say, here go those Republicans get uncomfortable with our first black president, with their unprecedented opposition, and we really take those arguments on head on in the book and the discussion, because it's nonsense. And Mary Katharine joked about Hillary Clinton. The crux of, she is not a talented politician. She is not a particularly likable person. The entire crux of her campaign is going to be first woman president. It's identity politics. It is really their lifeblood. It's a very potent argument, unfortunately, and so they're going to milk it. We just want to open people's eyes, expose how this outraged circus operates. When we do a lot of original reporting and analysis, we have some great exclusive interviews in the book, including with some people who've beaten the outrage team, by the way, including Scott Walker, and including Senator Cory Gardner and a few others. But that's sort of why we wanted to write End of Discussion. And the other thing we wanted to do quickly, guys, is write it in such a way that it was not just a drag to read, an outraged book about outrage. That's self-defeating. So we want it to be intellectually honest and fair to the other side while totally open about our own political persuasion. And we also wanted the tone of the book to feel accessible and even fun and occasionally funny for people, because we're not going to fix this problem. We're not going to mend our dysfunctional national conversation simply by complaining and preaching to people who already agree with us.
And before we let you go, just quickly, fast forward 10 years. Is this problem better or is this problem worse?
Well, we, of course, hope, and we wanted there to be hope in the book, that the American people do get sort of fed up with this and go, wow, what is happening here? And I think you see a little bit of that in the discussion as I talked about with the comedians.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of our hopes is that, and one of the reasons we put in the subtitle that this makes America less fun, is that Americans don't like having fun taken away from them. They don't like having entertainment choices taken away from them. And perhaps they'll react to that before they act to the poison, before they react to the poison in our political discussions. And so we hope that it looks better. I do think that we have to talk about the problem. It does require a large cultural shift, and it requires recruiting a bunch of moderates and liberals who are not dyed-in-the-wool liberal activists who are committed to this kind of thing. And so that's why we tried to write it in a fair and fun way. So maybe we could grab a couple more of those people to join us in the coalition to chill the heck out, so that you don't get so offended by every little thing. And we hope those people will buy into the discussion, too.
We hope a lot of people do. End of discussion how the left's outrage industry shuts down debate, manipulates voters, and makes America less free and fun. Two exceedingly talented and really cool people, Mary Katharine Ham, Guy Benson. Thanks a lot for taking time for us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.